Northwest Arkansas is home to a complex Civil War-era landscape. The Ozark Mountains feature large battlefields, skirmish sites, long-term camps for large armies, smaller camps for individual regiments, marching camps, and 19th century roads. These kinds of archaeological sites and linear resources are directly related to the movement of both the Federal and Confederate armies. Local towns, including Fayetteville, Cane Hill, Van Buren, and Prairie Grove, among others, along with homesteads in the hinterlands, are also integral parts of this diverse wartime landscape. Because of the complexity of events that occurred during the first half of the 1860s, it is important to consider Civil War archaeology in Northwest Arkansas at multiple scales, meaning that site-specific data should be viewed in its regional context. In this presentation, we will discuss a relatively small-scale but dense assemblage of artifacts recovered from a 6.5-acre area on a prominent landform at Prairie Grove Battlefield State Park, an area of the park we refer to as the Borden House Hillslope. We will use the artifacts in conjunction with the historical record to recreate at least some of the events of Battle Day, putting this moment in its larger context, while considering the experiences of those part of or witnessing hostilities on that day, December 7, 1862. The Battle of Prairie Grove was part of the larger war effort in the Trans-Mississippi Theater, or the area west of the Mississippi River, including Arkansas, in which both Union and Confederate armies sought to control the state of Missouri. St. Louis is a critical port on the Mississippi River and would have given either army a major tactical advantage. Although portions of Arkansas were hesitant to secede initially, after shots were fired at Fort Sumter in South Carolina in 1861, Arkansas passed a secession ordinance and joined the Confederacy. Support for secession was hardly universal, however. Like many states, especially mountain states, subsistence-level homesteaders, many in the Ozarks, were hesitant to join the military effort. As Confederate hopes for controlling Missouri dimmed between 1861 and 1863, support for the war effort declined even further in Northwest Arkansas. There are a few key events that set the stage for the Battle of Prairie Grove that are important to recount, if only briefly, in order to understand how troops came to be situated on the landform above the Illinois River in December of 1862. The Battle of Wilson's Creek, fought on August 10, 1861, and the Battle of Pea Ridge, fought in early March of 1862, both had far-reaching effects. While Wilson's Creek is counted as a Confederate victory, the Confederate Army never gained a strong foothold in Missouri and were chased out of the state by Union forces not long thereafter. With the Union victory following at Pea Ridge, just south of the Missouri line, gaining control of Northwest Arkansas and the road to Missouri was an uphill battle for the Confederacy. Furthermore, the Confederate general at the time, Earl Van Dorn, moved east of the Mississippi River after the Battle of Pea Ridge, taking troops and critical supplies. Confederate General Thomas Hindman rebuilt Confederate forces in Arkansas in 1862, largely through the deeply unpopular Conscription Act, furthering disillusionment in Arkansas. However, Hindman managed to pull together 16,000 men camped at Van Buren in the late fall, creating the last real opportunity for Southern forces to take back Northwest Arkansas and move into Missouri, leading to a third major battle in the Trans-Mississippi Theater, the Battle of Prairie Grove. At this point in the war, Union forces were divided geographically, with a division under General James Blunt camped near Cane Hill, Arkansas, and the remaining forces under Brigadier General Francis Herron located in Missouri. Hindman knew the Union forces were separated and took the opportunity to attack Blunt with his full force. However, we know from primary documents that Blunt alerted Herron to Confederate movements, and Herron's troops made it to the Illinois River just east of Prairie Grove with remarkable speed. It was in this spot, on a naturally high landform in the town of Prairie Grove, that Hindman and his army made their stand, battling both Blunt and Herron's divisions of Federal forces. Hindman and the Confederate Army lost the day, although there were heavy casualties for both armies. The Union Army remained camped north of the battlefield for some time, and Confederate forces only made one additional attempt in 1863 to recapture Northwest Arkansas at the Battle of Fayetteville. Beyond these facts about who, what, and where, we know that both armies were ill-equipped, and Hindman's Confederate forces were short on small arms ammunition and heavy artillery, a consistent problem in the Trans-Mississippi Theater. Shoes, clothes, blankets, and food were in short supply, and winter in the Ozarks was brutal, with days and nights often dipping into single-digit temperatures. Similarly, Heron's march from Missouri to the Illinois River at Prairie Grove was extraordinarily difficult for the Union troops, who arrived tired, cold, and hungry after maintaining a hard pace over a period of days. The state of the soldiers on the battlefield are important to keep in mind when considering the human toll of the Battle of Prairie Grove. Today, the Prairie Grove Battlefield State Park consists of 840 acres owned and managed by the state of Arkansas. Professional archaeological work at the park since the 1980s has demonstrated that many portions of the battlefield, including important landmarks, are intact, at least archaeologically. Recently, a mixed methods approach, including archaeogeophysics, metal detecting, and limited subsurface testing, has shown that Civil War-era roads, houses, and outbuilding foundations can be located, helping us relate the archaeology to the historical record and center the events of battle day spatially. The Borden house in particular is referenced in primary documents, including in diaries and noted on early maps of the battlefield. Although opinions have differed, most archaeologists now agree the house, rebuilt, is sitting in its original location. The location of the Borden house is a critical signpost or geographical marker allowing us to reconstruct regiment movements and battery locations. Batteries and lines are described as so many yards to the west or east of the Borden house, and heavy fighting took place on the Hillslope just to the north, in the orchards to the east, and in the yard of the Borden house. The portion of the Hillslope to the north and east of the Borden house, the focus of this paper, is dramatic, at roughly 20 degrees at its steepest or approaching a 30% grade. One aspect of the Prairie Grove battlefield landscape consistently noted in the primary documents and more recent accounts of the battle is that the areas around the Borden house were heavily wooded and have remained so until today. Because we know the Hillslope was a central location in the battle in addition to remaining wooded, we expected this area to be largely intact. In other words, we didn't expect this area to be heavily picked over by metal detectorists, and more importantly, we were interested in what the spatial distribution of artifacts could tell us about the battle, who was there, and what the experience may have been like for people engaged in the fight. Fortunately for us here at the Arkansas Archaeological Survey, State Parks developed a plan to clear a significant portion of the Hillslope for interpretation and agreed to clear this area by hand. There is a broad view looking out from the Borden house over the pastures and fields of the Illinois River Valley and towards the next rise, giving visitors to the park a commanding view from the top of the hill and understanding why Hindman chose to make his stand at Prairie Grove and why it became such a deadly battle. About 4 acres were cleared to the north of the Borden house, and we surveyed an additional 2.5 acres to the east of that zone to make one large contiguous survey block. We swept 100% of the project area with metal detectors, excavating positive hits. We marked all the hits with a Precision Global Positioning System, a GPS, and processed all the artifacts at the coordinating office of the Arkansas Archaeological Survey in Fayetteville. Jared Pebworth did the processing, inventorying, and analysis of all the artifacts recovered. In total, we collected 633 individual artifacts as a result of this project. Of these 633 artifacts, 341 are clearly period or related directly to the battle. That is a little more than half of all the material we recovered. This number, 341, includes mostly ammunition, including artillery-related artifacts that I'll talk about in just a moment. But the vast number of what we recovered were small arms ammunition. Small arms ammunition included round balls used in smooth bore muskets and elongated or conical balls or bullets, sometimes referred to as mini or minié balls used in rifled muskets, along with a few other more rare types of small arms ammunition, including Colt revolving rifle bullets and .36 caliber pistol bullets. Military accoutrement or items associated with a soldier's uniform or official military items were found, but in very small numbers. Few buttons, a powder flask, and a brass saddle shield are some of the more unique artifacts found during this survey that are likely Civil War related. The remaining half of the assemblage of artifacts are related to modern reenactments, including those that occur regularly at Prairie Grove, along with some material that is related to the 1980s miniseries, The Blue and the Gray. Only one percussion cap out of 87 and one friction primer out of 37 are associated with the battle, with the rest being reproductions. And you'll see on this slide here that the authentic or period artifacts are outlined in red. Despite all the reenactment material we recovered, we have a very rich and largely intact battlefield assemblage. Examining spatial distributions of the battle-related artifacts recovered offers some important information about the day. Most of the small arms ammunition are lead round balls of 69 caliber and elongated balls of both 58 and 69 caliber found scattered widely throughout the survey area, along with small quantities of somewhat rarer ammunition. At first glance, no discrete concentration of any particular caliber are apparent, with one exception. A cluster of 58 caliber elongated balls, mostly fired, were found in the northeast portion of the project area. On closer inspection of individual bullets and calibers, we do see some patterns emerge. There are a few types of small ammunitions that are diagnostic for either the Union or the Confederacy. A total of 9 56 caliber bullets designed for Colt revolving rifles were recovered, all fired. From historic accounts, we know that only the 37th Illinois Regiment carried Colt revolving rifles. This regiment charged the Hillslope in the early afternoon and engaged in a fierce firefight in and around the Borden house and the orchard, and were eventually chased back down the Hillslope by Confederates. The scattered bullets perhaps reflect the movement of the 37th Illinois as they turn their weapons on chasing Confederates from the field. Other diagnostic bullets include 36 caliber pistol bullets made at the St. Louis Arsenal, also used by Union troops. We found 2 of those. There are also a few diagnostic small arms ammunition associated primarily with the Confederacy, including 54 caliber bullets and Enfield pattern bullets. Most of the 54 caliber bullets were dropped instead of fired. Perhaps these drops or unfired bullets reflect Confederate soldiers fleeing back up the hill after taking heavy artillery fire, or dropping bullets as they loaded their guns, giving chase to Union regiments. The Enfield pattern bullets were split between fired and unfired, but interestingly, one Enfield pattern bullet was stamped with an L1, meaning it came directly from a British factory. We know that one Arkansas regiment was issued Enfield rifles just prior to the battle and probably had these factory bullets. These Confederate associated ammunition types are found in 2 rough clusters, one on the west side and one on the eastern side of the project area. If we look at just the more common calibers, such as 69 caliber elongated balls, we see a bit more of this clustering. There appear to be 2 rough concentration of 69 caliber elongated balls in the project area. If we add in the 58 caliber elongated balls, this pattern becomes a bit more pronounced, although there is some scatter across the entire project area. We know that there were 2 Union charges of the Hillslope in the Borden house area during the afternoon. The first with 2 regiments from the west and the second with 2 regiments from the east. It looks as if we may have 2 approaches or perhaps 2 retreat routes through the woods as Union soldiers were chased down the hill by Confederates. Alternatively, Union small arms may have been trained on particular targets on the Hillslope, perhaps on skirmishing Confederate troops or troops that were in pursuit of the Union regiments. Another alternative is that perhaps we were zeroing in on battery locations as targets. Now let's look at the artillery. Artillery recovered includes iron fragments of James shell, Hotchkiss shell, and associated case shot, 12-pound spherical case shot, and Borman time fuses. The distribution of artillery is different than the small arms ammunition, primarily because it's not as dense, but there are a few interesting patterns to note. One cluster of artillery includes Hotchkiss shell fragments and associated iron balls. Upon closer inspection, we think this cluster represents a single 3-inch Hotchkiss case shot. We know that the 1st Missouri had 3-inch ordnance guns to shoot the size of Hotchkiss shell, and we can probably tie this burst to Captain Murphy's guns out in the Borden wheat field. The Union Army trained up to 20 guns to the south on the Borden House area and the Prairie Grove landform throughout the day. We suspect that all of the artillery is Union related, or at least the vast majority of it. The Confederate batteries were facing northward into the field, focused on the ford on the Fayetteville Road at the Illinois River. The artillery may in fact have more to tell us as we explore distributions in the historical record. Dr. Jamie Lockhart conducted an exploratory statistical analysis called K-means clustering, finding 5 potential concentrations of pieces of artillery. The implication is that we might be able to associate clusters, perhaps with specific batteries. We should mention, though, that our artillery is difficult to differentiate in the field from post-Civil War iron, so we may not have a completely representative sample. In summary, the kinds of artifacts recovered and the spatial distribution of artifacts reflect some of the chaos of the day and what clearly was an intense firefight. 4 Union regiments, the 37th Illinois, the 20th Wisconsin, the 19th Iowa, and the 26th Indiana, stormed the steep hill slope in front of the Borden House, and we may be seeing 2 paths up the slope or perhaps retreat paths as the Union regiments ran back into the agricultural fields and turned their firearms on Confederate soldiers in pursuit. When the Confederates gave chase to the retreating Union soldiers, however, they were met with the superior artillery power of the Union Army. Once General Blunt arrived with his army, even after some tactical blunders in the day, the Confederates were forced to retreat. This artifact assemblage recovered from the Hillslope at Prairie Grove battlefield reflects larger trends in Civil War era activity in northwest Arkansas and southwest Missouri. This landscape feature, the landform at Prairie Grove, should have and did give the Confederates an advantage, but a position advantage they could not fully realize without being properly provisioned. This scenario parallels the situation at Pea Ridge, where poor provisioning and a strong artillery fight from the Union won the battle. This hill slope feature, this landscape feature, also reflects the difficulties of fighting in the Ozarks. Storming a 20-degree slope was an act of bravery by those 4 Union regiments, but was costly, and in fact many Union soldiers died attempting to take the Borden House area and Blocker's Battery. The artifacts themselves reflect technological advances in the form of the rifled musket and elongated balls, but we still find plenty of lead round balls in the project area, a testament to the fact that the smoothbore musket, a less precise weapon, could never be replaced during the war when ammunition supplies were precarious. In conclusion, we have much more to learn about the Battle of Prairie Grove, its long-term effects on the communities in northwest Arkansas, and how this battle fits into that entire Civil War era landscape in the Ozarks. In the future, we'd like to expand our survey area boundaries so we can get a better idea or a larger picture of those spatial distributions of artifacts, which help us better interpret the events of Battle Day. Thank you.